So 8:23, 17. Today's focus question will be, how do I set up equations? Yes.
Can we do the same formulas?
Yes. How do I set up equations using angle bisectors? Alright, so let's define an angle bisector. An angle bisector divides an angle into two congruent parts. Into two congruent angles. Let's say angles. An angle bisector divides an angle into two congruent angles. So let's draw a picture. Let's add a couple of arc marks. What do those marks mean? That the angles are congruent. To make it simpler, we'll call this angle 1 and we'll call this angle 2. And we're going to say that if angle 1 is congruent to angle 2, then ray BC is an angle bisector. If angle 1 is congruent to angle 2, then ray BC is an angle bisector. Which angle does ray BC bisect? Angle ABD, right? Very good. So this section is going to deal with more expressions and equations and less whole numbers than yesterday's section. All right? So let's just say, let's look at example 4 on page 23. And I'm going to read it, and then we're going to draw the picture together. Or let's everybody read it. Example 4, finding the measure of an angle. Ray BD bisects angle ABC. The measure of ABD equals 6x plus 3. And the measure of angle DBC equals 8x minus 7. Find the measure of ABD. When I read that, it confuses me. So I just draw a picture of it. Okay? And if you draw the picture of it, it says that BD bisects ABC. So if you draw ABC, there's angle ABC. it says that ray BD bisects ABC. So here's ray BD. Is everybody okay with that picture? And if it bisects it, it splits it in half, and aren't these two angles congruent? It says the measure of ABD is 6x plus 3. So ABD is 6x plus 3. And the measure of DBC is 8x minus 7. So DBC is 8x minus 7. Find the measure of ABD. So that means you got to solve for x, and then you got to plug it in to find the measure of angle ABD. So your equation is going to be 6x plus 3 is equal to 8x minus 7. And then some of you like to move the numbers first, some of you like to move the variables first. It's a preference. It doesn't matter which one you do first. I'm going to move the 6x to the right side. So subtract 6x from each side. Those cancel. 3 equals 2x minus 7. If you add 7 to each side, then 10 equals 2x. You can divide each side by 2. And 5 is equal to x. Agreed?
Yes.
If 5 is equal to x, you go back to where the x is in the expression and you substitute. So you do 6 times 5 plus 3. And 6 times 5 is plus 3.
33.
So this angle is 33 degrees. If ABD is 33 degrees, what is DBC? If they're both 33 degrees, what is the measure of angle ABC? 66 degrees. Now, that's a problem where they gave you expressions for the congruent angles. Agreed? So why don't you predict what they're going to give you in the next example? What other way could you present this problem?
Give us the whole.
Say again? Give the big angle, right? And ask you to give the big angle and one of the small angles. And ask you to find, what would you be trying to find?
The second angle.
The other small angle. Agreed? All right, so let's take a look at that. Let's look at 4A on the bottom of page 23. And you guys are just going to have to be real careful when you read these problems and draw the picture and make sure that you get the expressions in the correct place. So 4A on page 23 says that QS bisects PQR. QS bisects PQR. So draw it. There's PQR. QS bisects it. If it bisects it, these two angles are congruent. Next, it says the measure of PQS is 5y minus 1. So this angle, PQS, is 5y minus 1. And the measure of PQR, P, Q, R, that's the big angle, isn't it? That's this angle. That big angle is equal to 8y plus 12. Find the measure of, they want the measure of angle PQS. So they're giving you one of the small ones, and they're giving you the total, or the big angle. Alright, so you have to set up an equation, solve for y, and then substitute. So if PQS is equal to 5y minus 1, and that angle is congruent to SQR, what's the measure of SQR?
5y minus 1.
Okay, 5y minus 1. So don't the two small ones added together have to equal the big one? So what's 5y minus 1 plus 5y minus 1? 10y minus 2 equals 8y plus 12. That's your setup. So you can subtract 8y from each side. Two y minus 2 equals 12. Add 2 to each side. 2y is going to equal 14. And if 2y equals 14, you're going to divide each side by 2. And y is going to equal
7.
y is going to equal 7. But that's not what they were asking for. So you got to substitute. So where there's a y in angle PQS, you have to replace it with a 7. So we got 5 times 7 minus 1. What's 5 times 7?
35.
Minus 1?
34.
So 34 degrees. Can you see how careful you're going to have to be in reading the problem? All right? Big difference between this problem that we just did and the previous example. In the previous example, they gave you the two congruent angles. In the second example, you were given the large angle and one of the small angles. So be careful when you're setting up your diagram, because that picture that you draw is going to tell you how to set the problem up, isn't it? Okay? Any questions on angle bisectors? All right, your assignment for today is going to start on page 24. You're going to do 9 and 10. And then on page 25, you can do problems 17 and 18. And we're on a short day, so I'm not going to give you any more than that. I also need you to check headline for homework. And answer the focus question.